The crisp morning air in downtown San Francisco was filled with the hum of traffic and the clatter of footsteps as commuters hurried to their destinations. Among the bustling crowd, a frail older man sat quietly on the sidewalk, his belongings tucked into a frayed duffel bag beside him. His name was Walter Green, though most passers-by never bothered to learn it. With a weathered face that bore the marks of years spent under the harsh California sun and a bushy grey beard, Walter was a fixture on this street. Once a skilled carpenter, a series of unfortunate events, injury, the loss of his wife and mounting medical bills, had left him homeless for over a decade. This morning was no different for Walter. He sat on a flattened piece of cardboard, sipping from a lukewarm cup of coffee given to him by a kind barista from the corner cafe. As the city moved around him, Walter's sharp eyes scanned the crowd, his carpenter's instinct for observation still intact. Not far from Walter, a sleek black Tesla pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Elon Musk, dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase brimming with papers. He moved quickly, his expression focused and determined. Elon had flown in for a high-stakes meeting about a new Tesla initiative. The meeting was critical. Partners, investors, and government officials would be present, and every detail needed to be perfect. But fate had other plans. As Elon briskly walked toward the nearby building, a stray pedestrian bumped into him, sending his briefcase tumbling to the ground. The latch popped open, and dozens of papers spilled onto the sidewalk, scattering in the wind. "Damn it!" Elon muttered under his breath, dropping to his knees to retrieve the documents. Nearby, Walter watched the scene unfold. Without hesitation, he set down his coffee and hobbled over to help. "Let me get that for you," Walter said, his voice rough but kind. Elon looked up, momentarily startled. The older man's tattered clothes and rough exterior didn't match the patience and calm with which he began gathering the papers. Walter moved quickly, his hands surprisingly steady as he corralled the loose sheets into neat piles. "You didn't have to do that," Elon said, taking the papers Walter handed him. "No trouble at all," Walter replied with a shrug. "Can't have you losing your important papers." Elon smiled faintly, his frustration melting away. "Thank you. Really, I'm in a bit of a rush." Walter chuckled. "I can tell. Always a rush in this city." Once the papers were back in the briefcase, Elon stood and extended a hand. "I really appreciate it. What's your name?" "Walter," the man replied, shaking Elon's hand. "Thank you, Walter," Elon said sincerely. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a few $100 bills, extending them to Walter. "Here, take this. It's the least I can do." Walter shook his head, stepping back. "No need for that," he said firmly. "Just glad I could help." Elon frowned. "Are you sure? It's no trouble." Walter smiled. "I'm sure. You have a good day now, and don't let those papers fly away again." Before Elon could protest further, Walter turned and shuffled back to his spot on the sidewalk. Elon watched him for a moment, then glanced at the cash in his hand. Shaking his head, he pocketed the money and continued to his meeting. But as he walked, he couldn't stop thinking about the older man's kindness and humility. That evening, Elon sat in his hotel room, replaying the encounter in his mind. For all his wealth and influence, he had rarely encountered such genuine generosity. Walter hadn't wanted anything in return, not even recognition. Elon leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city lights. "What can I do for him?" he murmured to himself. It didn't take long for him to come up with an idea. Picking up his phone, Elon made a call. "Hey, it's Elon. I need a favor," he said. "There's a man I want to help. Yes, I have his location. I'll send you the details." The next morning, Walter woke to the familiar sounds of the city, car horns, distant chatter, and the occasional bark of a dog. He stretched, rubbing his stiff joints, and prepared for another day. But as he moved to gather his things, his hand brushed against something unfamiliar. Sitting next to his duffel bag was a small black box, sleek and unassuming, with a note attached. Curious, Walter unfolded the note and read the neat handwritten message. "Walter, Your kindness yesterday didn't go unnoticed. Inside this box is the key to a new chapter in your life. Elon. Walter's brow furrowed in confusion. He opened the box and found a single silver key inside, along with an address written on the underside of the lid. For a moment he just stared at it, unsure if this was some kind of joke. But then a sense of cautious hope began to creep in. Clutching the note and the key, Walter set off to find the address, his heart pounding with anticipation. The address led him to a quiet residential neighborhood just outside the city. The streets were lined with well-kept houses, each with a small yard and a welcoming atmosphere. Walter stopped in front of the address listed on the box. It was a modest but beautiful one-story home with a fresh coat of white paint and blue shutters. A small garden lined the walkway to the front door, and a welcome mat sat invitingly on the porch. Walter stood there, stunned. The key in his hand felt impossibly heavy as he approached the door. Slowly, he inserted it into the lock and turned it. The door swung open, revealing a cozy living room furnished with a comfortable couch, a small dining table, and a kitchen stocked with everything he might need. On the counter was another note. Walter, this home is yours. No strings attached. Consider it a small thank you for your kindness. Sometimes the smallest gestures can mean the most. Elon. Walter sank onto the couch, tears streaming down his face. For years he had been invisible to the world, just another homeless man on the streets, but in a single moment of kindness, his life had changed in ways he never imagined. And somewhere in the city, Elon Musk smiled, knowing he had done something truly meaningful. Walter sat in his new living room, staring at the note in his trembling hands. His eyes kept flickering between the simple words Elon Musk had written and the cozy home surrounding him. It felt surreal, a dream conjured out of nowhere. For a man who had spent over a decade on the streets, the idea of having a place to call his own was overwhelming. But the reality of it hit as he walked through the house. The bedroom was modest but comfortable, with a neatly made bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the small backyard. The kitchen was stocked with food, fresh bread, canned goods, and a few small luxuries Walter hadn't tasted in years, like fresh fruit and coffee beans. It was a world away from the cold concrete of the streets. Word spread quickly among the people in Walter's circle. At the local soup kitchen where he often spent his mornings, the staff and regulars were buzzing about the mysterious house. "Is it true?" asked Ed, a fellow homeless man who shared Walter's corner of the park. "Musk really bought you a place?" Walter nodded, still in disbelief. "Left me a key and a note, just sitting there next to my stuff." Ed whistled. "Man, that's like something out of a movie. What are you going to do now?" Walter hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Live in it, I guess. Get back on my feet." For Walter, having a roof over his head wasn't just a comfort. It was an opportunity. Over the years he had learned to survive with almost nothing. Now, with a stable place to stay, he felt the stirrings of ambition he hadn't felt in years. The next week, Walter decided to write Elon a letter. He didn't have a phone or an email address, so a handwritten note felt like the most sincere way to express his gratitude. Sitting at the small dining table in his new home, Walter carefully chose his words. "Dear Mr. Musk, thank you for what you've done for me. This home is more than I could have ever imagined. I don't know why you chose to help me, but I want you to know that your kindness has given me a second chance. If there's ever anything I can do to repay you, please let me know. With gratitude, Walter Green." He mailed the letter to Tesla's headquarters, unsure if it would ever reach Elon. But writing it felt important, a way to acknowledge the incredible generosity that had changed his life. To Walter's surprise, a few days later, there was a knock at his door. When he opened it, he found a man in a Tesla-branded jacket holding a sealed envelope. "This is for you," the man said with a smile, handing Walter the envelope. Walter opened it carefully and found a short letter inside. "Walter, I received your letter. Thank you for your kind words. You don't owe me anything. Just focus on building the life you deserve. But if you're interested, I'd like to meet you again. Let's talk about what's next. Best, Elon." Walter stared at the letter, his heart pounding. The idea of meeting Elon Musk again was daunting, but he couldn't pass up the chance to thank him in person. The following week, Walter found himself at Tesla's sprawling headquarters, feeling both nervous and excited. He had been provided with a visitor badge and escorted into a sleek meeting room with glass walls and a stunning view of the campus. After a few minutes, the door opened and Elon Musk walked in, his casual demeanor putting Walter slightly at ease. "Walter," Elon said with a smile, extending his hand, "good to see you again." Walter shook his hand, his grip firm despite the nerves. "Thank you for inviting me, and for everything." Elon sat down across from him, studying the older man with genuine interest. "You helped me when you didn't have to," he said simply. "The least I could do was return the favor." Walter nodded, unsure of how to respond. Elon leaned forward slightly, his expression curious. "What's your story, Walter? What did you do before life brought you here?" Walter hesitated, then began to share. He spoke about his years as a carpenter, the joy he found in building things with his hands, and how a workplace injury had upended his life. He talked about his late wife, Helen, and how losing her had been the hardest blow of all. By the time he finished, Elon's expression was thoughtful. "You were a carpenter," Elon said, "so you understand design, precision, and problem-solving." Walter nodded. "That's right. I always loved making things that were both beautiful and functional." Elon leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I think I might have an idea." The next day, Walter returned to Tesla for what Elon called a test run. He was introduced to a team in Tesla's design department and given a tour of the workshop where prototypes were built. "This is where the magic happens," said Marco, one of the engineers leading the tour. "We design and test everything here, from car components to new manufacturing tools." Walter was fascinated by the machinery, the tools, and the creative energy that filled the room. "Think you could handle working with some of this?" Marco asked, gesturing to a set of blueprints on a nearby table. Walter studied the plans, his sharp mind quickly deciphering the details. "I could give it a shot," he said with a grin. Over the next few weeks, Walter was brought on as a contractor, working part-time to help with small projects in the design workshop. His role was simple at first, assembling prototypes, repairing equipment, and providing input on designs that required a craftsman's touch. To everyone's surprise, Walter excelled. His years as a carpenter had given him an eye for detail and a knack for creative problem-solving. One day, as Walter was working on a custom tool design for the assembly line, Elon stopped by the workshop. "How's it going, Walter?" he asked, watching as the older man adjusted a piece of machinery. "Pretty good," Walter replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "Feels good to be building things again." Elon nodded, a satisfied look on his face. "You've got talent," he said. "I knew it the moment I saw how quickly you helped me that day. You see problems and you solve them." Walter chuckled. "I guess I've always been like that. Never saw much point in complaining about things when you could fix them instead." Elon's smile widened. "That's exactly the mindset we need here." Months later, Walter was officially hired as a full-time employee at Tesla, working as a design specialist in the workshop. His story became a source of inspiration for the entire company, a reminder of the value of second chances and the incredible potential of untapped talent. For Walter, the journey from homelessness to a career at Tesla was more than just a stroke of luck. It was a testament to the power of kindness and the belief that everyone has something valuable to offer. And for Elon Musk, it was a reaffirmation of a simple truth. Sometimes the smallest gestures can spark the most extraordinary transformations.